Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Hafaday, Tero, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry, and today we are talking about the book Now for Then, the story of the Marianas Marine Scouts. And here to tell us more about that story is the former governor of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Juan and Babauta. Mr. Babauta, buenas.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and especially thank you for keeping this memory alive of our Marianas Marine Scouts. How did you first hear about this story as a young person?
I heard of the stories from my earlier days when I was serving in the legislature as a senator. So when I go out to social functions, some of the men that served in the Marine Scouts would tell stories about what they did, and of course, the family members were like, yeah, you know, he did this and did that, and he joined the Scouts, and so these were the kind of the first time that I heard about the Marine Scouts, and then later on, when I actually went to Washington as the resident representative, then I said, you know, we need to pursue this, and. We did.
Why is this story so important? Why did you commission the writing of this book when you were in office there?
Yeah, I felt that the role of the Marine Scouts needs to be documented, either in the form of a book like this, you know, with their pictures. I had the pictures in every one of them in the book. To be kept for future generations so that they know some of the history that is taking place here in Sinamai. And what you're doing here, you know, the Humanities Council, you was interviewing me about this issue, that's very important. You know, we would have a recorded history of what happened.
So what happened? That is the question.
Okay.
Set the stage for us.
Okay.
Who were the Scouts?
I want to set the stage, and that, you know, the battle for Saipan gave birth, in my opinion, to the Marine Scouts. If it wasn't for the battle here, we would not have a Marine Scouts. And that was in June 1945 when the war actually when Saipan was being bombarded by the U.S. military, and then the island was declared
secure.
In July of 1945. But what happened was that there were still several hundred Japanese soldiers that were in hiding in different locations all over the island. Some here, most of them here in Saipan, and some of them up there in the northern islands, like, you know, Pagang, Agrigan, and Maug. And they were serving as snipers. They were taking shots at military, U.S. military personnel. And so the reason I said that the battle for Saipan gave birth to this, because the Second Marine Division said, well, you know, we cannot take any more of this sniping from Japanese holdouts out there taking shots at us, and so they came up with the idea that they want to recruit some local men, young men, at the time, because when my father was recruited, he was like 17, 18, because they felt that by recruiting somebody here locally, these men would be the ones that are familiar with the terrain here in Saipan.
Makes sense.
They know where the caves are, they know where the hideouts are, and other locations where the Japanese soldiers were still in hiding with their guns aimed at U.S. soldiers. And so they were recruited, and so these men, when they were recruited, they were issued Marine Corps uniforms, they were given rifles, they were trained in hand-to-hand combat, and when the U.S. Marines were doing this, these 50-plus men, they really felt that they were being recruited as
Marines.
Yeah. You know, and they were
you
excited.
Got the uniform.
They got a uniform, and they were taught how to fight hand to hand, and they learned how to throw grenades and all that. So, they went out there with accompanied by the Marines, U.S. Marines, and they combed the hillsides of Saipan, the caves and everything, and flushed out. Their role was actually to kind of flush out the Japanese in hiding, the Japanese soldiers that were still in hiding, refusing to surrender. And some of them became native police under the auspices of the army, and so those are the kind of the two roles they had. Some of them were to assist the Marine Corps, U.S. Marine Corps, flush out the Japanese, and some were shot at. You know,
of course, right? How successful were they in this mission they were given to flush out the stragglers?
Some of the stories that these men told during the interview, and we talk about this, they were shot at and they had to shoot back. And there was one or two of them that had shot back and actually killed somebody, a Japanese soldier. The U.S. military, sad to say, did not have any records of these men. They didn't even know what their age were. They didn't have. They received no compensation, and after, when the U.S. forces left the latter part of 1945, the U.S. military, more specifically the 2nd Marine Division, said thank you and goodbye. And that was the end. And in between that time, when the U.S. forces left, stories were told in social functions about their role. And the legislature was involved in trying to get these men recognized. The local veterans associations here were wanting to make sure that these men were recognized. And in fact, the late General Ben Blas of Guam also had a hand in recognizing that this was an important event, and he also wanted to see that these men were recognized. Guy Babauta was also a veteran of the war here himself, wanted these men recognized, but nothing ever came of it. There was never ever any official recognition, because if there were to be a recognition, it has to come from the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. government. And when I was elected resident representative to Washington, I was there for 12 years. I decided on this issue to hire and get Ed Pangilinan on board, working for the office. Ed Panglinan being the chairman of the Marianas Political Status Commission when we were negotiating the covenant.
The covenant to establish the U.S.
To establish the political relationship.
And
so Ed and I had something in common, and that was that we both were sons of two of the Marine Scouts. His father was a Marine Scout, and my dad was a Marine Scout. And so we both had this common interest, and we said, okay, you know, there's 50 other men that were recruited. Let's do this for all of them, not just because of our parents, our fathers. So we set the course towards recognition, and we went through a lot of things that we felt was kind of cumbersome, but nonetheless it was something that we had to do.
I imagine it was a lot of interviewing of the actual men, or was it?
This was later on, and so what we did as an initial approach was, I decided as resident representative to write letters I wrote letters to the U.S. Department of Defense. I wrote letters to the Veterans Department, the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps. I even wrote letters to the White House inquiring whether anybody out there, you guys, the department, are aware that these 50 men were recruited, and anybody there had any kind of records of the involvement of these men. And nobody ever responded. In fact, maybe one or two responded and said, we have no records. They didn't even know. Or if they did know, they did not want to admit. So I decided to look into documents that were declassified in 1971. And it was placed at the United States Military Archives in Washington, D.C. And we decided, Ed Panglin and I decided that we want to look at what those declassified documents were. And so I formed a team in the office, and I said, I assigned 3 or 4 of my staff. I said, this is what we're going to do to see if we can dig up some records on the Marine Scouts. So my staff, over the course of 2 years, went to the archives, the Naval Archives, and they went through 50,000 pages of documents, piece by piece, at the archives, looking at materials, and it took them 2 years to review all those documents. It was tedious. They were coming back to the office tired, and they were just kind of, they had to pick up boxes and go over the files one by one. And so finally, by a stroke of luck, and I would say
a lot of reading,
miracle, there was one out of the 50,000 pages. There was one page. There was a one-page document that says 50 Chamorros were recruited by the Marine Corps, and it read, and I'm quoting the document, on 19 August 1945, 50 Chamorros were assigned to the 6th Military Police Battalion for training and instructions on military tactics. So we felt that was the kind of the smoking gun in terms of documentation, that 50 Chamorros were actually recruited. the document just says Chamorros, because the Marines, when they were doing the recruitment, they couldn't distinguish between a Chamorro and a Carolinian. So, but later on we said there was 50 plus Chamorros / Carolinians were recruited. You know, the next step is what to do with these documents. And Peng-Lin and I decided that to research various U.S. laws. There are U.S. laws out there that recognizes any involvement of civilian, either helping or involved in the military, for recognition, for being in that role. And so we decided that U.S. Public Law 95-202 provided the opportunity to recognize these scouts. And it authorizes the review of civilians who provided service to the country. So obviously these 50 plus men were civilians. They went out and helped the Marine Corps, and they fit this category in that law. And we also followed the guidelines from the GI Bill Improvement Act of 1977 and from the Department of Defense directive, which is the Civilian / Military Service Review Board, responsible for responding to any requests for recognition of prior military service. So given these 2 or 3 U.S. laws that provides for recognition of something like this that we went through with the Marine Scouts, the next step was we wanted to figure out who these men were. We had no idea. All I heard was in the social gatherings that some former Marine Scouts were telling stories, but we didn't know who these men were. There was no documentation by the Marines that recruited them. There were no names. They were not compensated, and so we're kind of like, where do we start? So Eric Peng-Lin and I actually started with the most obvious ones that are really kind of out there telling the stories, and then we'd ask them, who else was involved? And so we actually interviewed over 12 Marine Scouts. Most of them had passed on. But out of the 12, they gave us practically over the 50 names, plus names. And during this interview, we collected affidavits from each one of them. They told their stories. It is documented in this book, all the affidavits and the pictures of this men. And as a final step towards the recognition, we filed a 100-page application with the Secretary of the Air Force on September 30, 1997, and the petition called for official recognition of the United States, of the Scouts as United States veterans, U.S. veterans. The application was filed on September 30, 1997, and the application was approved on September 23, 1999, 2 years later. And then on January 31st, the year 2000, we had the Scouts were inducted and honorably discharged as veterans of the United States Marine Corps.
And that was a ceremony here in Saipan, correct?
We had the ceremony here in Saipan. And so, when I tell these stories, there are other things that needs to be kind of clarified here. For example, how did they get the rank of corporal?
How did they get the rank of corporal?
How were the Scouts that couldn't attend the induction discharge ceremony sworn in? Where was the ceremony held? Who attended the ceremony? This kind of things needs to be documented, right? And it's in this book, but it also needs to be said and told. So how did they get the rank of corporal? Well, when the application was finally approved by the review board, the Department of Defense sent a group of about 6 or 7 Department of Defense officials to my office, headed by a full bird colonel. And we went through the application and to tell us officially that these men is hereby, that our application is hereby approved, and we want to talk about how we can do an official ceremony to recognize them. So I said, well, you know, one of the things is that we need to determine what rank do we give these 50 plus men. And the colonel responded saying, oh, you know, the rank is, we're going to give him the rank of private. So I wanted to kind of make it dramatic, and then that I kind of hit the table, not too hard. It's like, you know, private? And you abandoned them for over 50 years, almost 60 years, and refused recognition of these men? And you're going to give them private rank? And they were all stunned. It's like, and so they asked to be excused for 10, 15 minutes, and they went into the other office, and they were kind of consulting with probably the Department of Defense and other officials in the department. 10, 15, 20 minutes later, they came out, and they said, so Representative Babauta, what rank should we give him? I said, we should give him the rank of sergeant. I mean, this has been over 50 years, almost 60 years, right? Well, they regrouped again, and they went back. 10, 15 minutes later, they came back again, and they said, well, what about the rank of corporal? I said, corporal it is. And everybody got the rank of corporal. Because of this back and forth. And my main argument was on point, you know, is to emphasize that these men played a vital role. They were trained, and they were left behind without compensation, and for the next 50 plus odd years, almost 60 years, forgotten. And you're just going to give them the rank of private? You know, so anyway, so we had the ceremony.
I wanna say it's been almost 25 years now since the official recognizing ceremony. But as we come down to the end of our show, I want you to share about what you're doing today here in 2024 to further commemorate the service, really, of the local Marine Scouts.
Okay. Can I finish this off just before I answer that question? The ceremony was held here in Saipan at the multi-purpose. And some of the men couldn't attend the ceremony because they were either at the hospital and or their homes, bedridden. And so the governor P.P. Turnor at that time, the general out of Hawaii, and the federal district court judge, and I went to their homes, went to the hospital. We had them sworn in, discharged at the same time simultaneously. I've never seen anything like it. That's what happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And the general was like, Representative Babauta, this wouldn't happen in the States. Anyway, so fast forward, you know, now, there's like 3 or 4 of us guys that are wanting to make some final recognition of the role of the Marine Scouts. And it would be me and former Congressman Bill Torres, former Congressman John Regis, and the architect Herman Cabrera. we are pushing for a memorial for the Marine Scouts, either somewhere, anywhere on the island of Saipan, or at the American Memorial Park. And so we're kind of talking to somebody at the American Memorial Park to see if we can erect a memorial, a wall with the names of all the Marine Scouts. And also, we want to involve the code talkers that also played a role in the war here. And so we want to combine these two, build a memorial honoring the men that were recruited. They served their purpose, their mission, and they were abandoned for 60 years. So this memorial will, once built, will live forever, and it'll remain a vital history of the CNMI.
Thanks to you and the work of your office and the efforts of Mr. Edward Pangilinan, as you mentioned. Thank you for reminding us about this, and thank you for continuing your efforts to make sure that these heroes are properly recognized.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts before we go?
No, that's it. This has been a labor of love because it is very time consuming. We've been writing letters and we've been communicating with people outside of the CNMI in Washington about the recognition of the Scouts by having a memorial constructed, and we enjoy it. I enjoy it, and these three other guys that are involved, they really enjoy it.
Thank you, Mr. Babauta.
Thank you.
Our guest today has been the former governor of the U.S. Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Juan and Babauta, speaking about the book he commissioned when he was the resident representative for the CNMI to the U.S., now for then the Marianas Marine Scouts. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.